Okay, so there's been some recent fight news in boxing in the world of Misfits. Tony Ferguson's announced that he's coming back to fighting again. This is his first boxing fight in his career, from what I can remember. But he's making his boxing, I think, his debut against YouTuber influencer Salt Papi. Now, never in my time of running this channel did I think I'd ever call another man Pappy, but that's the dude's name, so what can you do? Tony Ferguson, of course, in my opinion, a former legend. You can do things to ruin your legacy, and losing 7 fights in a row is one of those things that can ruin your legacy for me. Um, and that's what Tony Ferguson did. Of course, at one point, Tony Ferguson was, like I said, legend, one of the best lightweights ever, probably the best fighter to never win an undisputed world title. Um, like I said, a wild, unpredictable, unique striker that would really throw the kitchen sink at you, right? When he'd fight you. Demon on the ground as well. One of the few guys at that point in MMA that could actually get a submission from the bottom, as well as offensively on the top, being a great submission artist too. But like I said, that was Tony Ferguson a long time ago now. The Tony Ferguson of recent hasn't really got any of those traits. He's an absolute shell of his former self, and that came off of a number of really bad losses. Of course, his initial loss to Gaethje, and then following that, getting sent to the Shadow Realm by Michael Chandler. Of course, losing to Paddy, losing to Bobby Green, losing to Michael Chiesa, all of these guys, right? And the nature of those losses, he just got dominated so many times throughout his career, throughout the end. I think he lost 7 fights in a row, maybe more. I think it was 7. And honestly, like I said, that's the sort of thing that can ruin a legacy, right? I say all of that to say, of course, Tony Ferguson's coming back. He's fighting Salt Papi in a boxing match. Um, Tony Ferguson was known for his striking, not known for being a good conventional boxer though, by traditional boxing standards, which is what you're going to be judged by in a boxing match. And as far as YouTuber influencers go, Salt Papi actually looks like a half decent YouTuber influencer boxer. As far as these influencer boxers go, Salt Papi is one of the more decent ones, right? Um, so I think Salt Papi's probably going to beat Tony Ferguson. In all honesty, I think Tony Ferguson, like I said, he's an absolute shell of his former self, and being a fighter who's able to still speak confidently, still speak a big game, and then when you're actually in the ring, I mean, Tony Ferguson, he'll probably come into this fight hyping up, saying, he's probably in the best shape of his career, great training camp. You can say all of these things, but when you get in there on fight night, we will see that you're not the prime Tony Ferguson anymore. We'll see that you're chinny, that you can't take a shot, your body's not willing to take a shot. As much as you are a warrior who wants to go out on your shield, your body knows that you're not. Not that he's not a warrior, not that he's not tough, but his body's been there so many times at this point. And subconsciously, it's probably starting to be like, okay, here we go again. Do you know what I mean? Let's either chill out or let's shut down entirely. Unfortunately, like I said, I can't tell you anyone that Salt Papi's beat. Even though I have seen him box a few times, off the top of my head, I can't remember names, but I have actually seen him box, and like I said, he's a more decent one. Tony Ferguson, of course, has got the more experience in fighting in general, and he can use that to his advantage. Ringcraft, making it a scrappy fight, like I said, in general, just making it a tough fight. If he can do that, Tony Ferguson's got a chance. Of course he has. He's been in as many fights as he's been in. You can't, you know, see a guy like Tony Ferguson and go against a YouTuber and be like, well, Tony Ferguson's got no chance in winning this. Tony Ferguson's got a chance, but in all reality, Salt Papi is the younger man. He's got the momentum behind him as well. Even though I think he has lost, but even in general, no one's going to have less momentum than Tony Ferguson. He's lost like 7 fights in a row. Do you know what I mean? No one has less momentum than that. Of course, this is on the same card as the what's it called? The Till v Rockhold fight, which I made a video about. That'll be coming out around the same sort of time as this video. But yeah, it's sort of sad to see for Tony Ferguson because, like I said, at one point it was a real legend. He sort of ruined that legacy with all those losses, but at one point, one of my favourite fighters to watch, and even in that initial loss to Gaethje that ended Tony Ferguson's win streak, that wasn't a bad performance. Tony Ferguson was getting clipped, he was getting caught, but he was in that fight. He was a live body and was throwing stuff back. Defensively, Tony Ferguson's never been great as well. You know, even when, on his win streaks, even when he's winning against guys, guys could find his chin, they could land on him. And in boxing, you know, where it's more headshot heavy, and also where he's been knocked out multiple times at this point. You sort of like Salt Papi's a young man who's been doing this, been boxing, been improving his skills. You don't fancy Tony Ferguson to take those shots, but yeah. I'd be curious to know what you guys think. Do you think Tony Ferguson's going to win this, or do you think Salt Papi's got this one in the bag? I'd be curious to know what you guys think. Another episode of the Seth Solo Side Quest in the bag, and I'm out. Peace.